clean seemed lighter when I was like 25. Alright, so you saw Jeff break this piston ring earlier. This is actually going to become a tool for us. So we have a new to us ultrasonic cleaner here. It's off right now because we can't film the screeching. But as you can see, it's cleaning up pretty nice here. But there's still these carbon deposits, and some places through the piston ring lands there are still carbon deposits in there as well. So what you want to do is crack one of your old piston rings, use it as a scraper tool. Use the machine, the clean cut side from where the piston ring ends butted together, stick it down into the lands, and ever so gently scrape all this down and break all that carbon out there. Be careful not to like jam the ring down into it and scratch up your landings, but you need to get all this carbon out so it seals good. You see all this carbon that's built up on the ring just from scraping through there just a little bit. And it's still coming out. So spend some time here, get these nice and clean, and then go ahead and dunk them in the ultrasonic. If you have one, if not, soak them in some gas, some diesel. You're probably going to want to let it soak for a few hours. Let it get broken down good. But once you do, pull your pistons out. Use a brass, nylon brush, something that's not going to mar up the aluminum. As you can see, the ultrasonic gets this stuff to where it just wipes almost right off. And honestly, as it sits, this is perfectly fine to put back into service this clean. You don't have to get too crazy, but we got an ultrasonic, so we're just going to get this good and clean. This one's looking good too. Alright, so we are going to go ahead and install the back plugs in the block. We've got our thread-in oil plugs for the oil galleys, and then we've got our cam plug and a big socket that mostly fits the back of it. So on these plugs, I'm going to use some thread sealant. I like the liquid stuff. You could use tape. Don't use tape. Better than nothing, but don't do it. This doesn't need a whole lot. I like to push it down into the threads. Try not to get much on the end there so that it will go down into the galleys. You just want this on the threads itself. All right, now for the mini-me ratchet. These don't need to be super tight, but make sure they're tight. It's a close line. Right before this stuff dries, I like to take a piece of paper towel, or normally my finger, and just clean around this. You don't have to, but I like the look of it better. This stuff will stay kind of liquidy when it's in open air. All right, next up is the cam plug. So I'm going to take a little bit of sealant. Just going to take a little dab of it on my finger. And I'm going to skim the entire circumference. Do not glob this stuff on. You just want a skim coat so it can seal up any imperfections and that you don't get oil coming out of this. Because if this leaks oil, you got to pull everything apart. Get some of this excess off. All right, and start the cam plug in. Right, you want to make sure it's submerged. And just one more tap on that side. And I'm going to call that good. All right. Go ahead and wipe any excess RTV away. Or gasket, sealant, whatever you want to call it.
Sealing compound.
Ooh, fancy. All right, now we are good to go ahead and put the plate back on it and remount it on the block. All right, so I'm going to go and clean the crank next. I'm going to take the crank bolt out, then use a brass hammer to drive off cam gear sprocket. Maybe. I don't think that's going to happen in reality. I'm right, it is happening. All right. So that is off. I'm going to give this a bath with some brake clean now, and then use a air nozzle, blow out all of the oil ports on the crankshaft, just clean any of the dust off that's accumulated from sitting in the shop for a few days. Alright, I'm going to use an air gun, blow in all of the ports. Alright, that looks good to me. So next up, I'm going to take the flywheel off, or flex plate off of it, just to make it easier to set in. And we should be good to set it in the block. Alright, so I'm going to go set the crank in now. A couple things need to happen simultaneously. We need to lube up the bearings with some assembly lube. We need to put RTV on our split rear main seal. A tip when installing these, install them offset in the rear main cap like so that when you set it down, one part goes into the block, the part that's in the block comes up and goes into the cap. That offsets the little crease there, which is where oil seeps out. So if you do that, it helps a little bit. This one was actually installed flat before, but this is the right way to do it. All right, so I'm going to take some assembly lube. Give each of these a liberal dose. This is honestly way too much, but more lube is always better. All right. Spread this around the bearing shell so that you don't have any dry spots, and spread it on the face of the thrust washer as well. All right, next I'm going to take some RTV and I'm going to put a decent sized goop in each of those holes. I'm also going to do the same thing on the rear main cap as well. Goop the top of that, and just a smidge on the actual deck surface. All right, so everything's lubed. We are good to set the crank in. All right, when setting this, make sure to set it straight down into the bearings. All right, and once you're set in, do not spin it. Right now, these bearings are not round. New bearings especially will damage them, but just don't spin it right now. Wait until you have the caps torqued down. All right, I like to set the rear main first. Make sure to put that little piece in. All right, now you will need a dead blow hammer or something similar.
I have the one that attacked the orcs at Helm's Deep. Or we have a rubber mallet.
That looks like the original one from Mario.
Like Helm's Deep. Oh! This is Gimli's hammer.
All right, so let me just wipe this down, make sure there's no dust on it to knock into the engine. At this point, bolts in. I've lubed the threads with engine oil. Do not put engine oil in the holes. You can actually hydraulic down the bottom of the hole and blow the threads out of it. So just lube the threads. This just needs engine oil. So I've got all the caps seated. Now I'm going to go in and start torquing the main caps. Find the spec for your engine. I'm going to do about 3 steps of torque. So divide your final torque by 3 and increase it by that much each time. through on your final one. Re-click every bolt. Crankshaft is in. Now, should be able to spin the crank freely by hand. Hooray!
At least none of them went righty-loosey.
Yeah. Yeah, at least none of them ended up needing helicoils or something horrible. So, I think we are good to start pushing in pistons.
Sweet. That's not too bad.
Nah.
I've felt worse.
Yes.
That's really not bad at all. Okay.
And that's really thick, sticky.
Yeah, I mean that's with the assembly lube in there, so that's doable. Okay. So now you need to do ding ding ding.
Yeah, the rest of the fun stuff. All right, next up is going to be installing piston rings. So I've got our cleaned piston here. I'm going to start with the oil divider. It goes in the bottommost rail. Then I'm going to take one of its dividers, try and spiral it on. These rings can be spiraled, the oil rings can be, but the cast compression rings do not get spiraled on. You will break them or bend them, and you will not have a very fun, happy engine. I'm trying to make a happy little engine. All right, so there is the gap for that one. Let me find the gap for the oil scraper. And it is right there. So I'm going to do this one about 1/3 out. If I can get my fingers to comply. There we go. All right, and I just rotated the scraper ring away from the little spring washer, whatever that corrugated one is called.
I love that we use all these high-tech terms around here.
Yeah. Thingamadoodle.
Just wait till we break out the doohickey.
Right, that one is there. And then this gap is there. I'm going to bring you about here. All right, those are in. So that is our oil control pack. Next up is compression rings. That is the top compression ring. This is the second compression ring. All right, this is marked top. That does not mean it is the top ring. That means that this side of it goes to the top. So I'm going to use a piston ring expander for this. I believe this was $11 on Amazon. Go buy you one. Well worth. If you spiral this on, you will bend the ring, possibly break it. Cast iron is not very flexible. All right, that is in. Good. So next up is the top compression ring. This one is not marked in any way, so it does not matter what way it goes on. If you have any doubts on this, contact your ring manufacturer. Right, it's around the back side. Now our compression rings are on. I'm going to set these 180 apart. So that's there. All right, compression rings are 180 apart. And let's make sure that our oil ring is not lining up with one of those gaps. It kind of is, so I'm going to rotate this one to be about a third out of the way, or a third clock, so to speak. All right, so our rings are now good. I'm going to squirt oil liberally on the wrist pin, the oil pack, rub it all in, make sure it's lubed up good. I have already cleaned our bore with some acetone, solvent, whatever you got. Use a white rag that you can wipe in there and clean it until you get no residue coming up on that rag anymore. I'm going to oil the bore as well, but oil the piston a lot because that is very vital for the rings to survive on startup. Right, you're there, you're there, you are there, you're there. All right, that's all good. Pull the cap off the connecting rod, get it ready to set. Right, gonna take some of our assembly lube, hit it on the bearing. You can also put the assembly lube on the rings. I'm not a huge fan of having super thick oil on the rings, but you can do that as well. Your choice. Right, so I've got my piston ring compressor. This is just a standard deal. You don't need any of the fancy ones, although the one-piece machined ones are kind of nice because you just put it up to the bore. You don't have to worry about cutting yourself on this spring steel, which will happen very, 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 very fast. Right. It's looking pretty good. All right, and when you are putting pistons in, most of the time, this notch right here indicates the front of the engine. If you put this in backwards, you will get really, really bad piston slap because the wrist pin is offset a little bit and it'll be on the wrong side of the piston bore. All right, we got some rubber caps here to go over the connecting rod bolts. Right. Not a fan of these piston ring compressors. Right, put you up. Not enough. Yep. Gotta pull that back out. All right, and this is going to be the fun of using the cheaper version of piston ring compressors, because as you can see right there, the bottom oil scraper popped out and is stopping it from going any further. So I'm going to reseat this, try it again. So yeah, those CNC ones, they're pretty nice. Okay. Did it again. Oh, wait, no. Oh.
Congratulations. There's only 7 left.
1 out of 8. Only took 3 tries. All right, now that this is in, I'm going to knock it down the rest of the way so it touches the crankshaft there. Put the cap on it, torque the bolts down, and keep going down the line. This is going to be a process.
And that happened 8 times. We're not going to show you all of them because it was just a nightmare for Cam. He spent a good hour and a half on those rings using that cheap spring compressor. It is one of those times when maybe it would be a good idea to find yourself a really good, probably slightly more expensive spring compressor. I think we had like $14 in that, but we had about $75 worth of pain and agony for Cam trying to get those rings to go down inside the bore using that compressor. But you won't have any pain whenever you go out and help us out on Patreon. Please check it out for us, folks. It's a good way for you to support what we do around here. If we have done anything at all over the last several years to help you make your build better and a little cheaper, it might be worth going out and doing some support. Now, we don't say you have to come in at the $10 a month level. That's just where you start getting the meetings with me. But if you want to come in and say at the $1 or $2 or whatever, $5 level to help us out, that'd be great. What you're doing is you're helping me to pay Darren and Andrew to come in here and do some of the edit work to help me out during the week to get other things done around here that need to be done. With about 6 cars in the queue right now, we have a lot that needs to be done. So it would be great if you could do that. Also, the money goes to help the kids that come in here on Saturdays to buy pizza and Coca-Colas. And boy, howdy, can those kids drink some Coca-Colas. So think about Patreon. It's a great way to help us help you. Also, there's Super Thanks. If we've done one thing that you really liked, you can go out to Super Thanks and you can say, Mr. Jeff, as my kids call me, because they're not my kids, but anyway, Mr. Jeff, you have helped me on this particular video, and I would like to gift you some moolah to help you with other things that you're doing around the shop. That would be great. $1.5 million probably would cut it. And that's not pennies, folks. I'm talking dollars. I kid. But who's going to turn down $1.5 million? You know what I'm saying? Finally, folks, do me a favor. Be kind to each other. Love on each other. Treat each other nice. You guys have a great week, and we'll see you next time on Autorestomod. So you may be wondering, why isn't Cam standing here with me? Now, he did not run screaming from the building. In fact, we were planning on shooting the exit for this video the next week that we worked, which was the 18th. As you can see, none of those things happened. We did not shoot the intro on the 18th. Thus, I am standing here in all my glory by myself 2 weeks later. These things happen. Peace.